The end of grain marketplaces. Basically, 2 of our top 10 B2B marketplaces have just died. What they would say is the farmer wants a one-stop shop. Actually, I love Bushel's play is they're basically like a Shopify for the grain trading process, right? An area of B2B marketplaces, which 2 of them were in our top 10, Indigo and FBN. There's an article by the CEO of now the exited former JV between Cargill and ADM, 2 of the largest grain traders, linear grain traders in the world, have just exited their JV to a tech company called Bushel. We're going to talk about that. Anyway, the CEO of that exited JV startup wrote an article the day the grain marketplace died. So basically, 2 of our top 10 B2B marketplaces have just died, according to him, as of October 12th, 2021, they are now dead. The end of grain marketplaces. You can see here this article, Mark Johnson, very sharp guy, new to the grain agricultural industry when he took this role, running this company. So he pens this article saying the day the grain marketplace died. Basically, his reason for why the grain marketplace is dead, ultimately putting a target on these companies, Farmers Business Network and Indigo Ag, is that he's saying no one wants a marketplace, is basically the TLDR here. Marketplace doesn't actually solve any problems for the industry. And, you can agree with them or disagree with them, whatever. Bushel's the company that ended up buying GrainBridge, which is the name of the company in the JV between ADM and Cargill. So here's my take on it, right? By putting a target on Indigo and FBN, who have both raised a bunch of money, by a bunch of money, I'll tell you, hundreds of millions of dollars. Indigo just had a $500 million fundraise, which FedEx put in a lot of money on, and others. They did have a reshuffling, like they reshuffled their CEO. So, it's not all rosy. But Indigo has raised over $1 billion, $1,160 million to be exact. And then FBN has raised $629 million. Now, yes, what you have to understand, with that much money being raised, these companies, FBN and Indigo, both on our top 10, are not, the whole business is not a B2B marketplace to trade grain. That is the marketplace component of the business, is grain trading. Mark's article here, you can find it on Medium, goes, much deeper into the ins and outs and the specifics of the grain and agricultural industry, which there's a lot of nuance around. But my big takeaway on what makes Indigo and FBN special is that their whole point is that we don't just do grain trading. Their whole value prop is that the need they're trying to solve for the farmer. If you read Mark's article here, Mark's article is saying no one needs a grain trading marketplace. The grower doesn't need it. The buyer doesn't need it. But if you ask Indigo and FBN, what is the challenge you're solving? That wouldn't be the thing that they would say. What they would say is the farmer wants a one-stop shop. That's what the farmer wants, right? The farmer doesn't want to have like 5 different things that they interface with. They just want one place to make their life easier. And what does that mean? So, if I was to take an even bigger step back here on the state of, growing grain, so corn and soybeans and a bunch of other kind of these crops, that you can store the product, right? It's not fast expiration dates. If you grow strawberries, it's very different flow. Also big part of, farming in the United States and elsewhere, but this is really around grain. So you can store this stuff, you can sell it at different periods of time. If you're a farmer, there's inputs providers and output providers. Output providers being Cargill and ADMs that sell the grain, the output, and then input providers like a Monsanto, which is owned by Bayer, a Nutrien, right? So they're selling you the fertilizer, which is big money, selling you seeds, other things like that, right? There's other players in between, But just if those are the two ends of the spectrum, inputs, outputs, right? The Indigo and FBNs, the special thing that they're doing is providing a one-stop shop from inputs to outputs for the farmer. And that is very valuable. Why? Because, you're spending all this money on your inputs. There's all these different things that you can do to try and optimize yield, which is ultimately, right, how much crop am I growing per acre and all this kind of stuff, right? What kinds of seeds am I using? What kind of fertilizer, soil, right? All these different things that you could do to impact yield. So how do you optimize yield? And then on the output side, how are you optimizing the price that you sell the stuff? When you can connect those two, can you A, make a more seamless experience for the farmer? B, can you ultimately help the farmer make more money, right? And find the best combination of input, output, and the growing process, etc. And that's ultimately, I think, the big unlock in the industry. That ultimately, I feel like if you were to ask an Indigo and an FBN, they would say that is the main thing they're trying to do, is a one-stop shop. Now, they would speak to it in different ways. When you really look under the hood of an Indigo and FBN, they have like 5 different business models. Grain trading, B2B marketplace is one of those, and they're doing big volumes there, by the way. They don't make a lot of money from it, which is why we didn't have them as, for example, our number one B2B marketplace. Even though if you were to look at the GMV they're doing, it's monstrous and they're doing huge volumes. But they don't actually monetize it very well, which is why, yes, they're still in the top 10, but they didn't get the number one spot, for example. They've absolutely raised the most money, by the way, those two, versus the other B2B marketplaces in the top 10, right? But still not number one because of the monetization dynamic. But when you look at actually a lot of where these companies make their money, like in Indigo, actually a lot of the initial tech and product and value there was on the input side. They make a lot of money selling inputs. Inputs is a huge business. Look at Bayer, which owns Monsanto, and all these, these are really like highly engineered, very sophisticated scientists making fertilizers and seeds and all these things, right? That to me is the real value prop. Whether it's a grain trading marketplace or not, is not actually the heart of Indigo and FBN. Now, why is that important? You go read this article. Indigo and FBN are, kind of spoken about as kind of like, with the target on their back because of this news. Now, the interesting thing about Bushel, which is the company buying GrainBridge, actually I love Bushel's play, is they're basically like a Shopify for the grain trading process, right? They're not trying to actually do marketplace, but they're trying to provide the tools to more easily sell in a digital manner for both the buyer of grain and the seller of grain. Cargill actually invested in Bushel, right? I'm like, whoa, Cargill's not going to invest in a marketplace that's trying to disintermediate the linear grain traders, okay? But Bushel's building technology to help digitize the grain selling and buying process and not disintermediate the existing players, but rather enable them. Big difference between kind of marketplace and being a kind of Shopify type of approach, right? And that's really Bushel. And obviously the JV that Cargill and ADM were funding was not, they were not building a JV to disintermediate themselves and build their own grain trading marketplace. So you can imagine the kinds of tools that GrainBridge was building are similarly enabling the existing players. And that is the synergy I feel like between the Bushel and GrainBridge deal. Why ADM and Cargill have decided to jettison GrainBridge, I think is actually maybe an even bigger question in all of this. I was shocked when this JV was first announced, right? Just to get two behemoth competitive organizations like an ADM and a Cargill to have a joint venture together is a big deal. Now this thing's being exited, and I would imagine why this happened is that these two very large organizations might have differing opinions of the future for the industry as it relates to new digital models and digital opportunities. And they may have actually said, this was a good exercise, but we want to go it our own way, or maybe they have their own strategy. They want to execute it on their own. They ultimately decided that they didn't want to share and be in the same boat with one another. And I feel like that is really the real reason behind why something like this was jettisoned, was it reached a point where they said, we don't really want to be in this together anymore, and we're going to go our own way. That's now been sunsetted. This JV is now no mas, which honestly could have had huge ramifications for the industry. But, I don't actually think it's really done much now. It's shuttered. The tech it's really a product, this GrainBridge company. It's now going over into Bushel. And, we'll see. I think Bushel's actually a very exciting business, but Bushel is still actually not solving for the main, what I think, challenge, opportunity, need of the farmer is, and that's one-stop shop. So what would be really interesting is if Bushel figured out a way to get into inputs, right? Because Bushel's not into inputs. Bushel's now very much so into outputs, touching the grain trading, buying and selling part of the process and digitizing it, right? They've raised $76 million in total. They just did a fundraise earlier this year in 21 where they raised $47 million at $167 million post-money valuation. So, not shabby by any means, really good growth for what they're doing. But again, what's the input play for Bushel? And if I'm a large linear input player, I'm looking at Bushel, right? If I am a digital input player or a new up and coming kind of, someone competing with an Indigo and an FBN on the input side, I'm looking at, hey, how do I deliver on this one-stop shop value prop? That to me is the big unlock here, which this is nice news. But again, it's kind of a red herring. Like, grain marketplace or not grain marketplace, the real unlock is one-stop shop. Hi, I'm Alex. Thanks for watching the show. Make sure to hit that subscribe button, but even better, make sure to follow us on Odyssey, follow us on Rumble, and text us 203-646-5159. Text the word Monopoly. You'll be subscribed. You'll get updates about when we're going live, our latest videos, and we'll send you even a little goodie bag. And in the event that we all get banned from big tech, we'll still be connected.